U.S. Department of State on Tuesday this week imposed a new travel restriction in Nigeria, requiring that Nigerians seeking to enter the United States on a B-1, B-2 visa post bonds of up to $15,000 before being granted entry. The B-1, B-2 visa is a U.S. non-immigrant visitor visa that allows short-term travel for business and tourism, such as attending meetings, conferences, or visiting family and friends. This new policy, which takes effect on January the 21st, comes only a few weeks after the U.S. government imposed restrictions on several visa categories. The Trump administration had cited high rates of visa overstays and insecurity as reasons for the restrictions. Dr. Nicholas Erameh is a senior research fellow at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. He joins us now to discuss the new U.S. visa restrictions. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
So what's your initial reaction to this policy? Are the reasons given by the U.S. justified?
Well, under the current presidency of America, nothing comes as a surprise any longer. So that the current regime had said placed a 15,000 naira visa ban on Nigeria and other countries itself. Which itself has become, well, if you ask me, because within the Nigerian context and within the other countries, that looks like a very outrageous fee.
Indeed.
But of course, you see, right from even in the campaign periods of, if you follow the campaign lyrics of Donald Trump, even upon getting into office, he has always emphasized the whole issues about migration, illegal migration, and how they contribute to insecurity in America, one. Then two, he has always centered around the whole issue about American comes first, right? So if you look at some of all these issues, most of these policies they are policies that have emanated from the government as a way of trying to check the excesses of the crisis of migration. But I would also want to say that we have not heard the last about these issues from the current president of the US. So it's a challenge how we also receive this information and also how other countries also receive the whole information, particularly looking at the kinds of money that is involved. One. Then two, you should also understand that it's not that because if you have a 15,000 USD, United States dollar, that means you automatically have a visa. No, that's not what it is. It also shows that there's a bond there. If you have a visa, there's a bond. So should you choose to return back, then there are rules for refund. Then or there are also rules to you forfeit the money when there's a violation about everything. So for me, it's really kind of generated all kinds of emerging issues within Nigeria, and coming from the fact that it's not the first time the presidency has introduced one or two kinds of policies to regulate visa issues.
All right, what would be the most appropriate response by Nigeria on scenarios like this? And I'm not talking about directly at the United States, but our own domestic policies regarding reducing the flow of migration to the West, especially the United States, the attraction to the US. What should we be doing at home to at least tone this down and encourage our people to invest more?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important question to say, because you see, in today's cosmopolitan world, migration itself is as old as man. So, but we need to begin to think about these issues side by side, what happens and what does not happen. Now, that means we need to go back to the pull and push factors about migration. That's exactly triggered migration, one. Then two, we also look at it in terms of how do we enhance this how do we harness some of these brains we have? Because sometimes one of the questions I always ask or I always ponder on is that most of our medical doctors that are trained within the hospitals, we say, that are not of good equipment and everything, they are all being trained by government funds.
Indeed.
They are being subsidized. Now, if you have that kind of scenario and some countries somewhere are just waiting to harvest them, the most fundamental question that I always ask that, what then is the return for investment? Because you see, the kinds of medication we go to, we like it or not, are subsidized education in Nigeria. So it means that the government is also doing that with the hope that the doctors are being produced would eventually, contribute to the system. Even in developed world, that's how the system work. People have been trained, they end up coming back to build the system.
Indeed.
But because of one or two issues, so many internal issues that we have not been able to address this. So coming down to the question then, what then do we do? For instance, we have a lot of medical doctors who have also shown interest that want to come back to the country. But of course, where they have left the country, the scenarios they have left, the situations they have left are still there. So that alone discourages them. If you go through those who have been able to visit the country throughout the December period, the 30 December period and everything, most of them just come as a way of trying to, just still meet old friends, hang around and everything. In terms of facilities, in terms of those kinds of pull factors that will bring them back, that's still not there. So if we're in that kind of scenarios, we would not really get the best of all these our products. One, then two, let's not also forget that most of the doctors we have also talked about and other professionals we have that have grown up within this kind of system, they are the people that have been celebrated everywhere across the globe today. So ask yourself what has changed or what changed.
But then I'm wondering, what are the potential economic and social consequences for Nigerians with legitimate travel plans, if this US bond requirements are strictly enforced, especially the middle income class?
Well, the thing about it is that, no doubt about it, there's going to be serious economic and social consequences about some of these issues. But you see, this is a domestic policy of a sovereign country. Now, it means that some people have said we must reciprocate. There's no need, it's beyond us to reciprocate. Why? We should not reciprocate because there's a US bond, then we want to reciprocate. No, rather we should go the other way around to say, okay, what other alternatives they would consider about these issues. Now, in terms of economic cost, it's not 15,000 US dollars, it's not a small money, and that's why the first thing I say is outrageous. It's going to bring a whole lot of emerging issues and other things like that. So, but what do we do? It's not a policy that we can change. The only thing we can hope for is that with time, because you see, if you studied the regime very well over time, there have been some steps that have been taken, and some of them have been, reenacted in one way or the other. Either maybe because some countries were initially tagged countries of special concerns or some other things. Then over time, there seems to be some amendments to all these things. Of course, one. Then again, within these contexts and policies, they might not be static. So we can only hope that something happens over time, then we'll do that. But if you ask me very well, the fear and the concern has always been there, particularly within this regime. So, and that is the reason why we have seen some of all these kinds of policies.
Talking about not being static, if you remember, sometime last year, the visa restrictions was limited to just 3 months of you getting in and getting out. For those who have legitimate business, or I'm even thinking about students who study over there, they will be affected in one way or the other. So scenarios like this, you can see there's a deliberate policy towards this. It didn't end at that, and now we're having this bond issue as well. So do you see further scenarios in this just to dissuade people from coming over to
just
the
like
US?
I said, if you listen, I said we have not heard the last about these policies. But whatsoever it is, every policy itself has both consequences and importance or significance, right? So it also means that we might not also understand what might be the immediate effect of such policy on the US itself. But trust me, there might also be some forms of concerns that will be raised about that, and there are also going to be some challenges the US itself will face because of cosmopolitanism of the world today has ensured that we need isolationism is a luxury no nation, no state can afford.
Now, you've talked about the fact that you don't believe Nigeria should reciprocate, but then the US cited overstay rates and security concerns, in adding Nigeria to the list. How should the Nigerian government address concerns about overstays, in ways that might mitigate future travel restrictions?
In that course, it means that it's not about reciprocating. It's about trying to address some internal issues and, reorientating Nigerians who are, traveling to the US on the likely challenges some of these issues might also face. So it's also like wherever you see you're out of the country, you see one or two Nigerians that are, trying to do getting involved in some bad things, you try to make them understand the likelihood implications of what their actions or inactions could eventually bring to the whole country. And that is why anytime you see yourself out of this country, or you're about to see yourself out of the country, you must consider yourself as an ambassador representing the country, not just your own self, right? And coming from the whole, what you're seeing today in the world, where there's all issues about labeling, and so we begin to think about what then do we do. So it means that the Nigerian government has or whether through the Ministry of Orientation, should go about to orientate the Nigerian government about the likelihoods, the challenges that might come off from this angle.
Indeed. Yeah. And on that note, I would like to thank you very much for your thoughts on the discussion. Dr. Nicholas Erameh, Senior Research Fellow at the NIIA. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's my pleasure. Thank you.